A regional outbreak of severe weather and tornadoes is expected by the Storm Prediction Center, Day 1. This is a severe weather analysis for March 30th, 2022, and we see a broad, moderate risk area. Tornado probabilities are quite high, as are wind probabilities. Hail, not very much, but the wind and the tornado, this is driving this moderate risk over a big area and for many populated locations. So in this video, we're looking at the environmental factors which are coming together to support this severe weather outbreak. And we begin our examination at 500 millibars. These would be the 500 millibar heights and winds. You can see here, broad trough dipping down into here with the strong mid-level jet coming out into the central and southern plains. Now as we play this forward, we're going to see some things start to happen. We see a short wave develop out of this, which there are two of them actually. Here's one axis right here, here's another one right here, and I can show that on the vorticity map here in a moment. But very strong winds starting to develop ahead of this, ejecting into parts of the Mississippi Valley, the Deep South, the Great Lakes region. Very strong flow coming into the area, and you can see here 500 millibar vorticity. This is absolute vorticity. There is the vortmax associated with that shortwave right here in the southern plains. But playing this forward, this amplifies, it becomes sharply negative, and we see here that by about 03Z, our trough is now here negatively tilted with the vortmax coming into this area here. So we do have strong upper support, we have strong forcing that is going to come into play. And what that's going to support is some very strong surface low development. You can get an idea. First of all, this right here is a squall line. That's what this is demarcating right here. A squall line moving across the region that progresses further to the east with time over a huge area. As you can see, this is still being plotted from Mississippi into Kentucky. Now this is ahead of the developing low right here. This is the primary surface low with a cold front extending to the south of there. It is downstream of this that things are going to get bad today. And part of that is going to be because of the destabilization. With the rapid pressure falls to the north, we're going to get strong moisture advection, as seen here at the surface dew point, with values, these southerly winds bringing values potentially as high as the mid to upper 60s for this zone, reaching through Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, into parts of Alabama, and even Tennessee. As we head through tomorrow afternoon and into the evening, we still have high dew points progressing off through Alabama that are going to help maintain this risk. Now we don't have as high of lapse rates. This is not a high lapse rate situation, but because of the moisture here, we are going to have some instability. Primarily, we're talking about a zone I'm going to mark in red right through about here. This is where we tend to have the highest instability in this setup. We've got mixed layer CAPE values that are about 1,000 to 1,500 joules, locally higher. Especially in this zone here, we could see some higher CAPE, perhaps nearing 2,000 joules in some instances. Now looking at the deep layer wind shear, this is also going to really come into play because, as shown before, that is a very strong system developing, and we're going to have really strong upper level flow moving into the warm sector, moving over the warm sector. You can see by this box right here, this white box, this is where this squall line, this QLCS, is going to be moving through. And by the way, QLCS is quasi-linear convective system. This is a line of storms with some embedded areas of enhanced wind, enhanced tornado risk, and we're going to get to discussing that here in a moment. But you can see right in that white box, the warm sector, strong upper level winds coming in, and that's going to translate to really strong wind shear, in particular throughout this area right here where we have these really strong winds ahead of the main trough. Because again, the trough is coming in right here, if you can kind of see that. So it's going to be right ahead of that we have these really strong winds coming in. And because the pressure is falling so rapidly, we're going to get a tightening pressure gradient. And you can see here already tonight, we're going to be seeing amplifying winds at 850 millibars, ramping up 50-60 knots. As we head into tomorrow, though, things get very strong, and we're dealing with, right in through here, a low-level jet that could perhaps be 60, 70, even 80 knots. Some areas might even be 90 knots, especially further to the north. So you're dealing with very strong flow coming in the low levels, which is going to do two things. Number one, it's going to increase the wind shear in this area. Number two, it's going to allow these downdrafts and the thunderstorms to be stronger because we're getting that rain pushed down on this really strong low level flow. You get that transfer to the surface, and that's how we're going to get widespread significant wind damage. Now here's a new way of looking at this. This is a new tool on Pivotal Weather. I'm going to be sharing all the links to all these sites that I'm using in the video in the description. But this is the Hodograph map and surface-based CAPE. So this is a really nice tool because we can see an overlay of where things are getting unstable and how the wind shear environment is changing. You can obviously see through this area large looping hodographs in the lowest levels of the atmosphere, and this is also up to here. And this is where these storms are going to be moving into during the afternoon. That's up to 18Z. Now if we play this out to 00Z, you got some instability over here, but we also have to deal with the primary axis of instability coming right in through about here, up into Tennessee, through Mississippi, parts of West Alabama. And look at the hodographs, extremely elongated. For example, right here, very large, very curved. That translates to very strong low-level wind shear, and that translates to enhanced severe weather potential. And we can get an example of this here in a forecast sounding. This is tomorrow afternoon, 21Z, in central Mississippi. A couple things you'll note. The CAPE profile is not extremely large. However, it is still indicative of moderate buoyancy. No inhibition. Some steep low-level lapse rates. Mid-level lapse rates are probably going to be rather weak. Also, very low cloud bases. That's going to be a thing that we have coming into play here. LCL heights below 1 kilometer. Now the wind shear is also very strong. If you look up in the upper right corner, this is the hodograph, the vertical representation of how the wind is changing in the atmosphere. It is huge. It is large. It is curved. It's indicative of a very strong wind profile. Deep layer shear in excess of 60 knots, as you can see in this box down here. And through this wind bar profile, very, very strong winds in the middle parts of the atmosphere, which is really going to translate to some strong deep shear, some really high organization potential with these storms. Now here is the HRRR simulated reflectivity. This is what this model thinks is going to happen. It might not play out specifically this way, but it is a possibility. And I believe this gives a general idea of what we're going to be looking at. So here we have the squall line. This is early in the morning. It is developing. It's probably got some severe weather going on already. This is across Arkansas, parts of Texas. Now as we play this forward, we see things are starting to become a little more well-defined. And I do want to point out one thing. We've got this squall line going up here in Arkansas. Down here things are starting to intensify, but you also notice a little bit of a broken nature to the line here and some enhanced updraft helicity. In Louisiana, we could be seeing the tornado threat really start to ramp up during the early afternoon and the late morning hours right through this region. We could see tornadoes start to touch down. And as we play this forward now, things are moving out into Mississippi. We have really strong updraft helicity tracks. We have very strong linear development all throughout this line in parts of Mississippi, getting up into southwest Tennessee, eastern Louisiana. Throughout this area, we could start to see widespread wind damage, significant wind damage, some gusts in excess of 75 miles per hour, and also several tornadoes, perhaps numerous tornadoes, and some of them could be intense, especially the further south you go. I would say central Mississippi, in the parts of eastern Louisiana and southern Alabama. You in this area here really need to pay attention. You could have enhanced tornado risk. Now playing this forward too, this is heading later into the evening, moving through Tennessee, and we're only showing this southern portion because this is the most significant. Tennessee, Alabama, central Alabama, northern Alabama, you're going to start to see widespread wind damage, tornado potential, again with some of these storms, linear or supercellular, you are going to get tornado risk. And this progresses into the night, into parts of Georgia. Could be a serial derecho event with widespread wind damage, especially throughout this zone right here. So we are going to be dealing with significant severe weather today. Be sure to look for live streams on YouTube. We will be tracking this. This has been a Severe Weather Briefing.